The global pandemic has forced business leaders to rethink how they deliver the flexible and seamless experiences necessary to keep their organisations and their employees operating effectively. According to our next speaker, it's all about creating resilient experiences fit for the future of work. So how do you achieve the organisational change necessary to adopt an experience-focused approach to digital transformation? And what are the key considerations when starting out on that journey when you're looking to build a digital workplace strategy? Here to help us explore what has changed, what that means, and what other organisations are doing to solve some of those challenges, please welcome Janine Marchi, Head of Marketing at WorkGrid. Hey, Janine. Good morning, Janine.
Hey there. Thank you so much. Really excited to be here today.
Yeah, great to have you with us. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Perfect.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Yeah, many thanks, Janine. There's a slight delay, but that doesn't matter too much. I think everybody's used to dealing with those sort of constraints over Zoom. You know, this has been very much the year of digital interactions. So we can hear you nice and clearly. Janine, I know you've got some thoughts that you're going to be walking us through in just a moment. Before we get there, as we've just heard in that opening session, you know, this has been a fascinating year for everybody, but not least those people charged with managing or kind of interacting with the intersection of people and technology. You know, you guys have really been on the forefront of much of the change that we've seen over the past 12 months. So what has this year taught you about how this space is evolving?
Oh, this year, of course, has been a very interesting year. I think it's what has taught us is that organizations, I think, have been surprised at how resilient they can be, how agile they can be, just how fast they were able to digitally transform aspects of their business, which may have, previously taken, multiple years. Businesses did it in months. And I just think that's incredible. And we all realize that we can make change happen quick and we can be agile about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fast-moving space, but the response has been nothing short of incredible. Janine, I'm going to hand over to you. Once again, we will leave some time at the end of the session for some audience questions, so I will see you back here for that shortly. Janine, over to you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. We're going to be diving into the topic of employee experience, and it's what I believe is really the next evolution of the digital workplace. We've all heard and seen that employee experience is emerging as a strategic imperative, with a growing number of studies proving the direct correlation between a positive employee experience and business outcomes. And the evidence shows when experiences are meaningful and fulfilling at work, employees are more engaged and productive. And that's what we're used to in our consumer lives. We have experiences that are relevant and timely and personalized, but how do we actually make that shift a reality in the workplace? And that's what we're going to be looking at today and diving into. So what I want to do is jump into the current state of the digital workplace, and maybe a little bit of humor too. So it would be ignorant of me if we didn't talk about the pandemic, and we already kicked it off in the intro today. But the reality is the pandemic has fundamentally changed the nature of how work gets done, and it's put a huge spotlight on the digital workplace. And for many organizations, what we're seeing is that the pandemic has turned all those digital workplace technologies that we have, they're moving from a nice to have to a must have status. And, what businesses didn't know is that a global pandemic would force their hands and make it imperative to quickly scale solutions to deliver secure, seamless experiences just to keep the business running during a time of tremendous uncertainty. And this has caused a fundamental shift. It's caused a shift in our cloud infrastructure strategy, right? And so I think, you probably fall into two different categories where you either had to make a huge leap to successfully migrate to a remote first strategy, or it was a wake-up call and you were forced to respond and react, ensuring your employees had access to all the applications, data, services to do their job in a secure manner and the infrastructure to scale to meet today's needs. And I mentioned this in the intro, but what we saw in terms of digital transformation was in just 2 months, we saw 2 years worth of digital transformation, according to Microsoft. And so for some companies, it may have been even a bigger scale of up to 10 years. But according to a study by Microsoft, companies worldwide spent $34.6 billion on cloud services. That is huge. And so what we're doing is we're redesigning our business, we're redesigning our products, our services, jobs, people at a pace we've never seen. And these are, again, significant impacts to the digital workplace. A growing range of personal things may be entering the workforce, employees using mobile devices to access work, the physical workspace. It's not the corporate office anymore, and that's a security concern, right? You have data now in homes and other places distributed around the world. And so I think sometimes as well, we may have new capabilities in the heat of the moment. If we added new cloud services, we may not have governance around these new capabilities, whether it's content discovery or mobility or machine learning. So lots of changes happening here. I found this interesting survey as well, which I thought was great, by the Digital Workplace Group. And it was really interesting where they were able to run the same survey from March to September, where the number one challenge employees were facing in terms of, or workplaces were facing, according to the digital workplace, was outside of budget constraints, was siloed systems and data. Employees are forced to use the digital workplace to find information and get their jobs done. Even if you didn't change your digital workplace landscape, hypothetically speaking, if you didn't add, any new digital tools, employees weren't actually forced to use those digital tools, right? So you're in the office, you could spin around in your chair and you ask a coworker where a document is or a file was. And if you're sitting in an open office space, you'd naturally hear things. Your coworker could walk by from another team and mention something. But now for you to kind of pick up and learn everything that usually is going on in the organization, all that need to know information, it has to have something formal around it using a digital tool. Someone either has to send you a message in Slack or an email or set up a meeting to make sure you have that information. So it really has changed. And of course, I think the reality is most companies have more digital tools or more collaboration tools. So it's only compounded it and made that worse. And again, we know these changes were good for business. We talked about how great it was for organizations to be able to change and to be agile. But at that rapid pace, I believe our digital workplace is at risk of being more complex than ever. We might not have apps that work together. We could have overlapping systems where employees maybe aren't sure what systems to use. During this period of time, we may have had shadow IT, where employees were purchasing cloud services on, corporate cards to expedite their needs. And so with no system to bring it all together, each system has a different user experience from the other. And we know that requires training, and probably maybe training that didn't even get to happen. So there's a huge burden on either your team's shoulders or your IT team's shoulders. And I think if we take a step back, we need to put ourselves in our employees' shoes and really look at what is the state today look like of your digital workplace from an employee's perspective. And again, we've reacted, we've responded, but now it's the time to enable. It's the time to really think about the future as we rethink the strategies between our physical workspace and the digital workspace and how they're going to intersect today and tomorrow, because we don't know what tomorrow is actually going to look like yet, right? I think one thing is certainly clear. We'll have to rethink what the experience is for employees and how technology will be used to support our employees. And that focus will be on the employee experience. And that is the next chapter of the digital workplace. As we move from an era of digitizing, we now move towards digital enablement, where we focus on simplifying experiences for employees, leveraging intelligent technology that can create experiences that are intuitive and are designed for the employee. It certainly will be a challenge because we know employees interact with brands in a much more emotional way. Brands like Apple and Amazon, they've really reset the bar. Companies are no longer just selling products, they are providing experiences. So from a technology standpoint, companies need a new approach, one that builds on the foundation of culture and engagement to focus on the employee experience holistically, considering all the contributors to worker satisfaction and engagement. We talked earlier about how we've rapidly advanced our infrastructure, but what we most likely didn't change is how organizations select and implement technology, as well as how we manage and interact with enterprise technology. We have to move away from managing the digital workplace from a technology lens, which is focused on transactional, service-oriented delivery, and migrate towards an experience-focused digital workplace where we start treating our employees like consumers. So I'm going to walk through these steps. I'm not sure if I'm assuming the slide deck will be available afterwards. I feel like it's skipping over a little bit, so I'm just going to keep moving on here. So we're going to talk about ownership. What you're going to need is formal ownership for the experience of your digital workplace, and that is how your employees engage with enterprise technology. This step can actually be really more difficult than it sounds because it flies directly in the face of how things have historically been approached in organizations. Most companies may have had ownership of certain digital tools, or perhaps you had a department that owns and manages end user computing, but it usually wasn't for the actual experience. And if you do, kudos to you, and I'd love to collaborate and see and hear about it. But what we find is the way that technology decisions are made is that they're made in silos because each department has its own objectives, projects, and budgets. And the end result is a series of individual experiences that don't interact with each other, and it creates a poor overall employee experience. So we need to ensure there's ownership with a shared vision around not only a goal of improving the employee experience, but a vision around how employees engage with enterprise technology and what that experience is. Now, we know employee experience is a huge buzzword, but it's not just an HR initiative. The digital workplace experience plays an important role in the employee experience. And for many now with the pandemic, it's one of the most important areas to focus on. And where we usually see organizations make a mistake with the ownership piece is they create some type of loose ownership, like a steering committee. And a steering committee isn't a bad idea. You're probably actually still going to want to have a steering committee, but you need a little bit more control because with the steering committee, everyone will go off with their and have employees' best interest in mind. But what we find is, let's say you're going to improve the employee experience, everyone's going to go and do that in silos. So HR might decide to revamp the onboarding process, rightfully so. It's one of the first opportunities that a business has to create a positive interaction with employees. And IT might start rolling out maybe a chatbot for its service center, and maybe finance is rolling out a new mobile expense tool to make submitting expenses easier. Again, all good initiatives, but when you take a step back from the employee perspective, it could end up being a disjointed experience. So without that formal ownership to provide strategic vision, each stakeholder will pursue their own individual paths. So getting the formal ownership right, you want to take what we recommend a product management approach, where you treat the experience like a product or a service and your employees as the consumers. You'd still work with multiple stakeholders involved or even a steering committee, but the formal ownership, whether it's an individual such as a head of employee experience officer or a product owner, would work directly with the right stakeholders, employees, and other teams across the enterprise. The ownership team would manage the roadmap, understand stakeholders' priorities, understand employees' needs, collect user feedback, and so on. This way, the vision will be delivered and represented equally across all stakeholders. And the ownership team really becomes that glue that binds together the separate parts of the employee experience. And so what is needed is a new mindset. We need to focus on our employees as consumers. And the good news is we can borrow a chapter from tested and proven methods within the consumer experience or the customer experience. It's a very similar approach your business takes today when designing the customer experience. You no longer just focus on delivering an end product or service. You think very carefully and probably invest very largely in the experience. And the experience for your customer is looked at holistically, and every interaction is carefully considered. In the consumer world, it's all about removing friction points from your consumer's intent, whether they are trying to make a purchase or contact customer service, even in non-digital scenarios. If you think about storefronts, lots of money is spent designing what is it like when a customer walks into a store? How do we remove all the friction points to make sure that they make purchases and make additional purchases too, right? So those are very carefully designed. And so the same needs to be applied to the employee experience. It warrants an end-to-end focus, similar to the way organizations think about the customer experience. And we're going to leverage those same tactics that are used in the customer experience. And it starts by understanding the experiences your employees have at work. You'll want to use design thinking and take a user experience lens to the entire process. Design thinking, if you're unfamiliar with it, revolves around a deep interest in developing an understanding of people from whom you're designing a product or service for, and really focusing on empathy. So you'll want to make sure that you build out personas so you can ensure you have coverage of not just creating experience for one employee, but really consider the different types of needs across your organization. Next, you'll want to understand what has the greatest impact on the employee experience. This is where the concept of moments that matter comes into play. When thinking about moments that matter, it's usually the standard rites of passage that come to mind for companies: onboarding, anniversaries, promotions, offboarding. And while those are certainly important events and they should be included, limiting those limiting the moments that matter to just a handful of significant moments that are usually span years apart from each other is not enough, right? An employee's day-to-day experience, for instance, is going to be critical for success. And that's where most of your digital workplace comes into play. Your employees come to work every day and they're using the digital tools that you put forth in your digital workplace. And if an employee comes to work and they're unable to be successful at their job, or they struggle to have the time to focus on impactful work, what they're actually hired to do, they're not going to be productive. They're not going to be engaged. They're going to be disengaged and they're going to be frustrated. And it's going to result in large impacts to your business. And so it can often be difficult to determine, what are actually those moments that have the greatest impact on the employee experience. To help address that, you can use a set of criteria to surface inefficiencies and complexities that occur that may be causing frustrating or moments or hindering productivity. And so the criteria you want to use should reveal high value opportunities. So you want to look at things like the degree of difficulty. To what degree do employees currently dread completing a certain action? I love using the example of password resets. I find that a lot of organizations, employees tend, I don't know what percentage it is, but I would like to believe that they wait till the last minute, right? And it's not just because you didn't give them enough time. So adding more time doesn't actually fix the problem. Why is it so painful for employees to do password resets? What about that process can you look at end to end and help employees make that process easier on them so that they don't dread to complete that action and they do it in a timely manner? Frequency of completion. How often do employees have to complete a certain action? How critical is something to moving workflows along? Does a certain action prevent something else from happening? Business impact. Will completing a certain action or failing to do so affect business outcomes that is very important to your companies or that employees care about? And so you want to make sure you don't overlook any of the smaller minor frustrations as well. Sometimes those small delighters can really, really add up. And ultimately, to effectively follow the customer experience best practices, you want to put yourself in your employee's shoes. And when you do that, what you'll find is your employees don't care so much about the systems that they use within a day-to-day, like what those actually are. Sure, they might care. They might have their favorite task management tool or prefer Zoom over Teams or something to that extent for video conferencing. But I think what you'll find is, they don't care what the expense management system is, right? Or what the learning management system is. They're thinking, how do I enroll in new training opportunities? How do I book time off? How do I find out if I have time off? Do we have short-term disability? That's how the employee is thinking about. So again, when you put yourself in their shoes, that's how you can better have empathy for them in the experience. And what you'll find too is if you do your persona work, persona A will use, system X much differently than persona B. And so it's also really important to consider the human aspect of any process as well. Employees have a range of emotions throughout experiences. Onboarding is a great example where employees might feel anxious or confused of the expectations of them. So it's not only important to understand how they're feeling, but how do you want them to feel? And try to create experiences that will help them feel excited and confident on the first day versus anxious and uncertainty. So, what does this mean from a technology standpoint? How do we build experiences that actually put employees in the center? Um, and how can you design experiences around the employee and the systems you already have and use in the workplace, not the other way around, which is usually how it's done? So I think if we go back to the world of the customer experience, there is a reason why your digital teams who are focused on the customer experience utilize digital experience platforms to design an end-to-end experience for customers across the range of touch points they interact with your brand. But in the world of employee experience, there traditionally hasn't been a platform designed specifically for the employee experience. That to get there, that's where we're going to need to adapt. Traditional development approaches, they've served us well, but they're no longer enough. We can no longer just mix and match pointed solutions or integrate together different solutions. So let's take a look at what's needed. Firstly, multi-experience is going to be the future. And we need to be thinking today how we support what our needs are today, but how can we quickly scale to also support the needs of the future? The way users experience the digital world today is undergoing a significant shift. Experiences like conversational platforms, virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, they're all changing the way people interact and perceive the digital world. And it's not as simple as copying over functionality or service from one channel to the other. It's about adapting the experience to cater to each device and each touch point even. In our consumer lives, we interact with brands and digital touch points. It's completely consistent. And that's no matter what the device is, right? And that is what multi-experience is all about, a consistent experience across the touch point of choice. Today, the touch point of choice might be apps or conversational interfaces, but who's say what comes next? So to be prepared to meet employees where they are in the moment, we have to focus on the channels that is best for their needs. And that's where the steps previously, when we were looking at personas and journey mapping, are really going to come into play. Because if you have employees, let's say, driving trucks across the warehouse, they're going to need a different experience and touch points than the customer service representative sitting at a desk when performing tasks. And I think if you look at a company's, a great example is Domino's. They have over 15 ways to order pizza. They probably have 16 by now by the time I read that article. And so again, it's all about removing those friction points. If you left your phone in the kitchen and you're sitting in the living room, no worries. You can order a pizza from Domino's from your smart TV. You could order one from Google if you have a Google Home device. And so again, they're very smart about thinking about making sure at all times you can get that pizza and there's no friction points. And now, not only are these companies providing amazing digital experiences, they're architected their backends in a way that allows them to successfully deliver these front-end experiences. And so they're doing that because they have an open and extensible infrastructure. These consumer-like experiences that we use, they're not simple on the back end. They're actually really, really complex. And just like the enterprise systems that run and support our business, the difference is how they're architected. So you're going to need an infrastructure that is open, extensible, and adaptable. So as your business needs change, you're able to adapt and keep up with the pace of innovation. And your digital workplace will be able to deliver experiences that can be tailored to individual needs or preferences. So we talked about Domino's, but Uber is another really great example that I want to take a look at here. Keeps jumping ahead. So the app for Uber is super easy to use. It's tailored to me as an individual. It's based on my preferences, and it's continuously updating to always provide me a relevant experience. And as an end user, I'm completely abstracted from what's happening behind the scenes. As you can see here on this infrastructure diagram, what is happening is it's a giant infrastructure consisting of thousands of services and an enormous amount of data to personalize and optimize my experience. Now, imagine on the front end if Uber made me log in and perform individual steps to set up a ride, choose my car, put in my location. Nobody would use the application, right? And this is how we need to think about our enterprise systems, where all of your systems of record, the information, the data, the services you use, they live in the background. But on the front end experience we deliver to our employees, it's seamless and it focuses on their intent. Let technology pull and consume the right data, the right functions, have the technology systems talk to each other versus an employee having to take multiple steps across multiple systems. And so to effectively bridge the silos where you have your back end systems and you can design and control that front end, what you need is the ability to manage the experience as its own layer. Very similar to how Uber is managing experience via a friendly app, and behind the scenes, it's a services-oriented and microservices architecture leveraging APIs to enable the flexibility to consume services. In the enterprise, too, it's likely that many of the systems you have public APIs available where you can access functionality and data from your enterprise systems to create and deploy new digital experiences that are built for the specific touch points your employees need to succeed and to grow your business. Now, all those data and those apps that used to be trapped in silos can serve as the building blocks to creating high-value digital experiences. Now, you might be thinking you can just integrate systems together, coupling the experience to an existing system like your HCM or your ERP to reduce the number of systems employees have to access to simplify the work experience for employees. But I'm actually going to advise you to think carefully when coupling services together and when choosing how you're going to manage the digital work experience for your employees. Because we've already seen today where vendors sitting in with the HR space, for instance, have started describing their offering as employee experience product. I think everyone's trying to be the next employee experience platform. And many of these solutions, however, are actually narrowly focused on something like employee recognition or onboarding or engagement. And some of these vendors are, though, however, doing a really nice job of trying to mix together integrations, and they're building out additional functionality outside of their core offering. Companies like ServiceNow, Workday, Oracle, but there's no escaping the fact that you're at the mercy of their roadmap, right? Not to mention the likelihood that one of the department or set of employees in your organization will not actually get the needs they need because you're stuck within the rigid confines of that solution. And what actually happens when you need to replace your HCM or your ERP or your ITSM? We don't keep software for as many years as we used to. And the rapid pace that the technology industry is changing between mergers and acquisitions, if you have to replace something that now you've put your whole entire employee experience wrapped inside of it, you're not just replacing a system. Now you're replacing your entire employee experience. So what we need to do, again, is a separate platform that can manage the experience. By avoiding coupling together the experience with an existing system of record, you can have your cake and eat it too by having a separate platform that allows you the ability to have those great experiences that are personalized, tailored for your employees, all while keeping your core systems that run your business. And the key is that aggregation or experience layer, again, where you have experiences on the front end that are 100% focused on the employee's needs. And it really allows you as well to expand to those multi-experience touch points we discussed, from apps to conversational interface, where employees can find information and get work done in a click of a button versus having to log into multiple systems or click 10 steps deep to achieve a task. And you can have the multiple experiences for different personas by leveraging the same system. So, we all see where you have one system like a CRM platform that sales really loves, but it doesn't meet all of marketing needs, right? So then marketing goes off and ends up buying another system, and you have these systems with these overlapping tasks. You can now have that one source system, but then have the different experiences needed for those two personas. And so once you have a solution where you can manage the experience, this is where it starts to get fun, because you can actually start designing experiences based on your employees' intent. So the example here that I have on the screen, I think this is a common example that we see across any organization, is employee needing to take a day off. So this might look different across any company, but I bet a lot of lot of the steps are the same, right? You usually have to go into your HR system to request the day off. You have to go into Outlook and submit your time off and update your calendar. And maybe you have to go into Slack, for instance, or some type of collaboration software and let your team know you're taking the day off. Now, imagine what the experience could look like if we could redesign the front end to be a simplified experience, a purpose-specific experience consolidated to allow you to request your time off and set you out of the office, all within one single experience, an easy-to-use experience where the system on the back end is updating everything for the employee versus the employee having to go across all the systems. And having this available now on multiple experiences on a mobile device. The worst thing is when you feel sick and you wake up and you have to turn on your laptop, log on to VPN to submit a day off. That's the last thing you want to do. And again, provide those moments that matter to employees. And the next thing is going to be striving for the unification and consistent end-to-end experience where possible. The time off example we just looked at was great, but what we don't want happening is now you just have all these siloed apps everywhere that, yes, they provide a better experience, but again, it's going to be a splintered experience because it's not unified for the employee. So think about how you can actually unify the experience for employees, whether you're creating a mobile app or a digital workplace hub or something on your intranet, where you can bring together these different experiences into a digital workplace environment where employees are seeing information pulled from multiple systems into a single experience. And don't just make it, obviously, again, have it available across multiple touch points or available to multiple touch points for the personas that need it, whatever it may be. Let me get this to pull up on the screen here. I have this example that shows an example of a unified digital experience where we're pulling in information on one screen from our HR system, our time management system. We have a people search directory, as well as we're pulling in payroll. And so these types of changes, they don't happen overnight, right? So I do want to provide just a few tips for success to help you. So to talk about really getting the foundation in place to build the experiences for your employees, then everything else is going to be building blocks for you. So it's going to be continual refinement and approach, and to be able to address changes as they occur. So you want to be able to start small and implement quick and easy wins that will get the attention and the buy-in you need. Consider, look at that list of criteria I shared. Consider something like high volume or high emotion items. I think high emotion ones are great. So a great example in IT, for example, is, think of your service desk ticket items. What are those moments that really frustrate employees? They can't get on the VPN, or maybe they need to set up a new cell phone or reset their password. Start with those processes, because there usually can be wins that, if you can help an employee get through something when they're very frustrated, that's going to come a long way, and it's going to leave an impact, a great impact for the employee. And, even some of those small delighters can really add big impacts. The high volume are a good choice as well, because it's going to add a lot of volume. You could also start with something that would impact managers or senior leaders, so you get that immediate buy-in from the top, right? And you want to make sure you really take a bottoms-up approach. Involve the employees from the very beginning. If you're going to be using design thinking, involve them every step of the way. Have them help ideate ideas. Have them look at the prototype. Have them follow along the whole process, so that it's not just once it's live that you are involving the employees. And make sure to measure outcomes, not just outputs. You'll still certainly be measuring the outputs, but you want to make sure that what will matter in the experience in terms of effectiveness are those outcomes. Is the experience engaging? Are you saving employees time? Is there cost savings? What about productivity and satisfaction? So those are really just some quick examples. And some highlights that I think, as we look to move forward here with the employee experience in our digital workplace, we know we've been able to respond quickly, but it's now the opportunity to enable our employees to be more productive and to be engaged. And again, I think the key is really that separation, the separation of the experience from your source systems. So hopefully you found that helpful, and we'll be around for the rest of the conference to continue to talk more about this. And I'm here now as well to hopefully answer some few questions while we have some time.
Yeah, great stuff. Many thanks, Janine, for that. Lots to dig into, and we do have some audience questions, which is fantastic. I'm sure that everybody here can identify with the idea of the digital experience being key for the employee. We are all obviously going through that ourselves. I think our first question is from Lisa from Farmers Insurance. Lisa. Hey, Lisa.
Hi.
Wonderful to have you with us. What's your question for Janine?
Thanks, Janine. I appreciate where you're going with this critical topic. And I think COVID has kind of thrust it in, but I think we should have all been thinking about it prior, which is, I'll call it the employee engagement. I used to say authentically digital. So how are we out there going to market with things that are digital curated products, yet we almost invert and ask our employees to be kind of, in essence, back in the Stone Ages with disparate systems, processes, et cetera. So my question comes very similarly. I used to say, listen, if we don't, A, eat our own dog food, and B, define for our employees the level of digital engagement we would expect of our customers, then we've missed the mark on being authentically digital. And never mind the fact that this digital revolution is actually fueled not from a top down, from a bottoms up approach with the consumers, which are in fact our employees, having the technology and capabilities in hand. And one point that you focused on, which I found very interesting, was in essence, the disparate doubling down of enterprise technology. How do we create and insulate ourselves as organizations? My question is on the investment. So how do we really show the ROI? Because in essence, employees are our most valuable asset, but are typically the least likely. You drive the old car first, you sell the new car, right? So how do we convince the ROI of this investment? And I really liked where you were going on insulating ourselves from, I'll call it the monolithic technology, so that we can continually adapt and own. I would call it our secret sauce, our logic layers. You called it the digital experience layer. Could you hone in on how you all have been seeing those trends in the marketplace? Thank you, Janine.
Yeah, definitely. You made a good point about the experience. And I think we have to have, you're used to maybe having service level agreements, right, for employees, maybe in your IT organization. But I feel like the next wave is going to be experience level agreements, where it's not just about the service you deliver, but it's about the experience you deliver. And so we work with quite a bit of companies who on building out the business case and the ROI, because that's a lot of times what it comes down to. And so I think usually picking a couple of use cases where, again, you can take an experience, and by improving it, you can show the amount of time you could save or the amount of hours and what those could mean for productivity think of like a high value employee. So you could pick scenarios for managers or a sales employee, and then tie it as well to maybe some type of business objective that you have at your organization, whether it's servicing the customer better. Okay, well, if you're those employees that service the customer, say they spend 2 hours a week doing some tedious task, how can you now optimize that task? And I think there's a big ROI play too with, if you're not necessarily always adding new pointed systems, if you're able to leverage your existing systems and not embark on a big, rolling out something like an HCM or an ERP is such a massive investment. Even things like a CRM system, you kind of build up some savings there. But it's going to come back to the productivity and the engagement as well, because we know if our employees aren't engaged, we're going to see the turnover rates, and we know the amount it costs to have to replace employees and retrain employees. So there is kind of that compounding effect as well. But I think sometimes just the time saving ROI can really go a long way. You'll find little things can add up to be millions of dollars per year in time saved when you multiply that out by the earnings of an employee.
No, thank you.
Yeah, great stuff. Many thanks, Lisa. Janine, that was fantastic. We got loads. Let's maybe just touch on that. How are you seeing kind of firms address this? Just, I guess, before we wrap up here, how are you obviously you work across lots of different organisations, all working on their transformation journeys. So what can you share about how others are approaching this? What are maybe the kind of the three key things to get right? Who's doing this well?
Yeah, so it usually varies in the organization in terms of, what are those moments that matter for employees. So we have some great use cases and case studies that I can share out, and that's what WorkGrid is doing. We have a platform that it's an experience layer that can sit above all your source system and allow you to deliver different experiences to different employees without replacing your system of record. So some of the really unique use cases we've done are things around your IT service management. That's usually a really sticky one where if you can improve that process, it saves employees a lot of time, but it also creates efficiencies for your IT team. What we found is using kind of the default models within ITCMs, usually employees have to fill out so many fields, right? They fill them out wrong, and then it's a burden on the IT staff, and the IT staff is spending time on things that aren't high value. So you gain employee satisfaction while also helping that IT team not have the burden of dealing with having all those tickets that are incorrect, and really being able to focus on the bigger items. The same with HR dealing with the service management. We've done a lot as well for companies that I think a big trend right now is your workers who are on the road, right? Maybe they don't have a desk that they sit at all day, but they need access to systems, they need access to data. And if you can provide them access to data and systems on their phones or an iPad, you're enabling them to better do their jobs and better support them with the tools and resources they need. So we've done quite a few use cases with customers where we've enabled their frontline workers with access to information on a mobile device.
Yeah, great stuff. Many thanks, Janine. Well, I'm sure you can share further information about some of those use cases and implementations after the summit. Janine Marchi, many thanks for sharing your thoughts this morning.